Welcome to In Solidarity, a Seva Cooperative Federation podcast. Seva Cooperative Federation has been working for over 30 years to economically empower women in the informal sector through worker-owned cooperatives and collective enterprises. To put it quite simply, we work as a women's enterprise support system to promote and strengthen grassroots women's enterprises. Through this series of podcasts, we hope to cover themes that are of importance to informal women workers and their cooperatives and collective enterprises, and how we can create an enabling environment for women's enterprises to thrive.
अभी तो बहुत बड़ा सपना है हमारा।
मुझे मार काम नहीं बहुत जरूरत है, मैंने ले जाओ।
अब हम लोग के पास कैपिटल आ गया है, अब हम लोग खुल के करेंगे बिजनेस।
સમયમાં તો જોવા જઈએ તો આપણે બધો કામમાં જ સમય જાય છે, પોતાના માટે સમય કાઢવો બહુ મુશ્કેલ હોય છે।
अभी हम लोग मतलब ये पैसा राउंड होते होते हम लोग 12-13 लाख का बिजनेस चल रहा है।
You've tuned in to In Solidarity, a Seva Cooperative Federation podcast.
The way we communicate has changed much in the last 2 decades, especially during and post-pandemic. While the internet has been successful in making the world a global village, the onset of COVID-19 got more people onto the internet to remain socially, financially, and professionally connected. In 2022, the estimated number of internet users worldwide grew to 5.3 billion, up from 4.9 billion in the previous year. This share represents 66% of the global population, reports Statista. A joint report by industry body IAMAI and market data analytics firm Kantar confirmed that for the first time in India, more than half of Indians, that is, 759 million citizens, were active internet users and accessed the internet at least once a month. According to the report, out of 759 million active internet users in India for 2022, 399 million were from rural India, while 360 million were from urban India. This indicates that rural India continues to drive the growth of internet in the country. Even though the gender divide persists till date with 54% male internet users, it is heartening to note that 57% of all new users in 2022 were females. It is estimated that by 2025, 65% of all new users will be women, which will help correct the gender divide. This as per the report. It further suggests that the digital penetration has improved not only in terms of spread, but also in terms of depth, and that in terms of usage. That is, for digital entertainment, digital communications, and social media, as they continue to be the most popular services in India. These findings are well supported by an admission made by one of our sisters, Sonaben, who belongs to the Mega Tribal Women's Agriculture Producers Cooperative. She says,
મારું નામ સોનાબેન મહેન્દ્રભાઈ ગામિત, ગામ ચાપાવાડી, તાલુકો વ્યારા, જિલ્લો તાપી. હું સેવામાં 2009 થી જોડાયેલી છું.
My name is Sonaben Mahendrabhai Gamit. I belong to the Vyara Taluka in Tapi district. I have been associated with the Seva Cooperative Federation since 2009 and work as a cooperative worker. I now live alone as my daughters are married and I lost my husband in 2022. I have a smartphone and I use it to make calls, send WhatsApp messages, and I do some office work also. I listen to songs on YouTube and watch the news on it sometimes. I have been using Google Pay for the last 1 year to make online payments when I don't have cash in hand. I also use it to pay electricity bills and get recharges done for other women in the cooperative. Some women in our cooperative use the smartphone while most don't own it still. They use it to check Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and other such applications. During the pandemic, our
એટલે
Agevan
ગૂગલ પે ને
Bens
એવું તો
would
નહીં
also
વાપરતા એ લોકો,
use
પણ
Google
ખાલી
Meets to
વોટ્સઅપ
hold
છે,
meetings.
ફેસબુક છે, ઇન્સ્ટા છે, એવું અમારી કોરોના વખતે ઓનલાઈન મીટિંગ ને એવી થાય ત્યારે આગેવાન બહેનો જોડાય. ગૂગલ મીટ છે એના પર.
With the internet usage and penetration breaking all records across the globe, the hope to bridge the existing gender inequalities in India that pushes women further to the margins of society brightens. A shining example of the internet being used by and for women is the path breaking digital platform shethepeople.tv. To tell us more about how the idea for women's internet emerged, what were the challenges, and how we can take digitization to women in the informal economy, we have with us today Shaili Chopra. Shaili is a journalist turned entrepreneur and founder of shethepeople.tv. It has a monthly viewership of 30 million. Shaili is an Aspen Fellow and is a recipient of the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for Journalism. She is currently building a new online initiative, Gayatri.com, that works towards solving basic reproductive and sexual health issues faced by women, especially in the rural areas, on a daily basis. Welcome to In Solidarity, Shaili. I'm delighted we get to have this conversation with you. So, Shaili, I'm really fascinated by a phrase you use, which is creating the women's internet. What does this mean? And can you just tell us a little more about why is the women's internet so important?
So I'm going to pick the women's internet, or what I now call the women's economy. India has what, 1.4 billion people, 50% are women. At 50% female population, we're 1/10 of the global population. 1/10 of the world are Indian women. We don't even look at ourselves as a force, let alone look at ourselves as people who should have equal opportunity and access so that we could move the needle for ourselves and our economy. We don't have that opportunity, and that is one of the most disappointing parts of my journey as a woman, journey as a business leader, journey as a journalist. And I asked myself, what have women done to not have half the sky? So I think to a great extent, a mix of voice and a mix of anger led me to the point to say it's time for us to get up and ask for what we deserve. And as we ask for it, we do what everybody does in their struggles, prove them wrong. And I think in that piece, the idea of the women's internet emerged because I realized that we all deserve and need shortcuts. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And therefore, the power of the internet and digital became that shortcut that I was waiting for. And therefore, the absolute, step on the gas pedal and get onto a mission approach to saying women not just need a voice, they need a platform. And from platforms, we need to go to movements. And from movements, it'll be a revolution, and we will make the change we want to see.
Wow. So, She the People was born out of this frustration that around 50% of the population is almost invisible. And that reminds me that in your book, you've actually given a number and you've given it a visual that this number is twice the size of America and 5 times the size of Japan. And even in that 50%, 96% of the women working are from the informal economy, which is a staggering number of people that have been invisible for far too long. So, Shaili, why do you think is it important to visibilize them and their work, and what have your major learnings from She the People been?
So I think we've played many roles, as one ends up doing when you're entering a space that's uncharted. Women and women's voices have been relegated to being the one that are the softer ones and should be less heard, less written about, less brought to the table. So I think that frustration was definitely one of the big reasons why the idea of She the People was born. But there are so many everyday frustrations one thinks of that remind you that when you think of a business opportunity or an opportunity to bring about change, you know, how little we have done and how much more we can do. As an example, when I was building Gayatri, the women's health platform, I was just aghast at the thought that 60% women leave the workforce because of irregular periods linked problems. And I'm asking myself that we are in 2023. We are talking about AI and flying drones. And we're still figuring out how do we get women to be part of a regular workforce. Forget about tech, STEM, AI, and NASA or whatever else, ISRO. So I kind of was asking myself that one of the biggest problems is, and this is back in 2015 when I was setting up She the People, is that we believe that in order for us to be successful as women, we have to launch rocket ships. We don't have to do that. If I put food on the table, even in my plate alone, that is huge success. And if we don't recognize that, we are problematic in our definitions. And the more I spoke to women, the more I felt that there was a reason why they were not willing to have these conversations. They thought they were worthless. We start at that point, and how do we think that we will ever dream big or do something? So I think the idea that today women didn't have a voice, they didn't have a platform, they didn't have access, where I wanted to begin. Having had the experience and the good fortune of being able to say no many times in my life and believe in the power of having that voice. So, to begin with, I was very clear about one thing: conversations and stories have power. For some reason, at that point, not enough people were saying this. And when the stories come from an unheard population, they are even newer, shocking, moving, stirring. And that's why when we started telling stories of women who were everyday regular women, from the woman who's playing the stock market as a mum to the one who's, a middle management person inside a brokerage firm, to somebody working in the world of makeup, or the woman at the Kolivara village in Maharashtra, we realized they had all common problems. What they were looking for were not solutions, they were just missing a sisterhood. And that's really what brought it all together for me. So I do love the term She the People, because it reminds us many times that when we write our constitution and read our preamble, we should remember that we the people will never be successful unless we have the power of She the People participate in it.
That's very well said, Shaili. And in fact, in your book, The Sisterhood Economy, you've said that 80% of the media reports politics, business, etc., and only 10% covers women and women's issues. How do you think we can change this segment based approach? And how do you think will that make a difference?
First, we have to start recognizing that women are half the country and that they deserve half the voice. Fundamentals can begin to build the transition out. The research that you are quoting from the book was done by a bunch of students who were playing around with some data, I think, in MIT. And what I found most fascinating was that what we always say, that the media is not covering enough, that there isn't enough talk about the issues at hand, or the way we cover, right? The victimization of every woman in every case. You know, being in the media, when you see how things are within, you realize that we are so much to blame on how we project, what we choose to project, what we choose not to report. All of these things play a big role. I remember reading a book in which someone wrote that when we are out there on the field, we have two options: to report on what's over or to report on what's left. And the more I thought about that, the more I felt angry that we were actually never reporting on what was left. To give you an example, when farmers kill themselves by suicide, their wives and children were not even reported on. Many of them were selling their kids in order to continue livelihood, right? In the case of a rape survivor, we get to know about the incident, but the repercussions on the rape survivor and where she, manages and how she finds life again is something we forget about. I see the same, by the way, in happy stories, right? I'm a big fan of showcasing women having fun. But do you remember the last time you read a report about how this set of women actually had a great time, and that this is how they are inspiring many others to live it up? As if women are born to gisao pito, but they shouldn't have a life of their own. So I think media plays a very significant role. For me, this was the calling which made me get up and say, of the 500 CEOs I've interviewed, if 467 are men, something is wrong with my world. The question to ask is, how many people in their very comfortable positions of power will get up one day and say, I'm getting off this pedal because I need to change, and I will go down again and start again and do it differently. It's not an easy decision, but I guess at some point I ask myself, if I don't do it in my 20s, am I going to try this in my 60s? And that's the whim that I got off with, and I'm very proud of that.
These numbers are actually appalling. And in fact, it reminds me of a study that I read recently that mentioned that across boards, all boards, there are only 17% of women representatives. And that makes me think about how all of our boards are 100% represented by women.
The problem in the world currently is how we define power. Okay. And the reason I say that is because I just got off reading a graphic about the top investors in India. There were 32 men. And I was fascinated with how this is defined. It's defined by the number of companies they've invested in, right? It's not defined by the impact they've had. It's not defined by how many companies actually lost out money and those failures were out there as a part of the numbers that they're talking about. And the fact that they don't look at any other lens of what it takes to invest and perhaps help someone open a new market, create a different impact, view it differently from valuations or returns. That is centrally problematic. If you ask me, there are thousands of women investors in this country, and the way they're investing is changing the livelihood of women, not necessarily making graphics look nicer with extra zeros. So I think fundamentally, if we change this, you rethink yourself. When I started She the People, I had the same self doubt that many other women were expressing to me when I was interviewing them. 8 years down, I just did another podcast where I talked about how proud I am of She the People, because I think it's a bigger brand than even many of these other top companies. We're together in here. We're not just giving you clothes to buy and fashion to follow, with nothing wrong with that. But we're energizing each other elbow to elbow and creating an engagement that is absolutely completely absent from what seems to be, according to me, a fairly basic, low hanging activity of shopping. So the notion that it took me 7, 8 years to convince myself and stand up and even say this, I totally get it where women are today. As top investors, instead of feeling good about investments, they're feeling guilty that the investment may have flopped or they didn't do well enough to deal with the boys. Problematic thinking. The boys need to fix this environment, the girls need to fix their head.
Right. So, this brings me to my next question, which relates to a data point that you had mentioned in one of your podcasts that I heard, that She the People has a viewership of around 20 million. And this data point is of a year ago, which sure has increased by now. So, from this data point, I just wanted to know, would you have a breakup of how much consumption of this happens in the rural and the urban areas? And would you by any chance know if women in the rural areas are also using this? This especially because, from our own research, a large number of women in the informal economy still don't have a smartphone, leave alone access to the internet. So, how do we make sure that we are not leaving them behind?
This is a great question. While I recognize the amount of work that Seva does with rural women and and women on the many kinds of margins that the Indian economy today has, I'm also very fascinated to see how quickly the conversation happening in urban centers is now fluttering in rural centers. As an example, I went for a wedding, seemed like a upper middle class wedding, all kinds of people from all kinds of places. But the number of people I saw who came from different parts, interiors of India. One lady came from Khatima, okay. And Khatima is a place, rice growing place in Uttarakhand. And she came up to me and said, I read your content in Khatima. And of course, I asked her, I don't know where please tell me where Khatima is. And I'm really sorry, that I didn't know about it. But what I find really interesting is that there is this tendency for us today to think that there is a separate model of things that emerges. When I say things, let me qualify that. I mean, conversations, content, the hawa of change, that this element is not different between rural and urban. There is a problem in terms of access. There's definitely lack of availability, in many cases phones, access to Wi-Fi, having shared devices. I'm with you on that. But if you ask me, deep down in the belly, the women in rural India are just as hungry, if not more angry and hungry, than the women in urban India. And to me, that is power. Because when sometimes when I not sometimes most of the time now, when we hire, we give prominence to people who are in non metro cities, because we feel like we want to have not just a diverse population, but we know that they're not just hungry, they're very hardworking. There's no sense of being conceited and privileged. I think that is really where we all want to get together, people who want to roll up their sleeves and get their work going. So we do see a lot of trends in content and conversation about the yearning to learn, to break taboo, certainly know how to break that taboo, even if they can't sometimes because of circumstances. That hunger is phenomenal. We've done close to 300 million video views on doctor led content on women's bodies. And trust me, a lot of that content is being consumed by people outside of the central cities because nobody talks with them about these issues and they're shy to go to a doctor. I see that today there are opportunity gaps that are slowly getting filled. You're right, many don't have a feature phone. But you ask them that the day they get a feature phone, what will they do first? They will educate the family, right? They will make sure that somebody can learn from the internet how to do the next school project, how to make the next pretty blouse so that she can sell it better as a tailor in a village. That is very, very powerful. So yes, there are gaps, but they're slowly filling. I mean, the surge of UPI to me is a great example of how we're able to see some money in the hands of women who want to kind of exercise spends without going through that credit card story or whatever debit card story, which is a good leap in terms of a revolution.
And I guess it also helps that She the People is a multilingual platform, which means that it is available in several languages so people can consume it easily.
Absolutely. I have never believed in building for elite. I come from a simple middle class family. My parents at home spoke to us in English, Hindi, and my relatives spoke in Punjabi, and some relatives in other languages, Gujarati, Tamil. Here's the thing, we've got this rich, diverse heritage. But if I can't express in the language of my comfort, you are already deleting me from the opportunity cycle just because you think that English will drive the world, right? I have nothing against those who aspire to learn English. And I hear you when you say that the opportunity cycle is biased towards language, like in this case, English in India. But I'm also a big believer of the fact that when you listen to somebody express themselves clearly and sharply in their own language, you do develop a sense of respect that you may not have for somebody who's talking highfalutin English. And I've done that many times, perhaps learned it the hard way when I was growing up with my own set of biases, right? So I think for me, that's been one significant piece. I mean, just to give you an example, we sat down with the team and said, let's start a Tamil um, Instagram page. We've been 4 months into it and we have some 80,000 followers on Instagram. We're just being honest and true to what this world wants rather than think that we know it all, right? And it's fabulous. Sometimes I find them far more interesting than how and which way we construct a sentence in English. There is so much juice in the way people can speak in their own dialect and language that it brings a sense of power, right, when it's put together with voice and expression, which sometimes can be so absent and dull in English.
So that brings me to my next question, and that is around digital. You've set up around two platforms and one chatbot, which is called Dr. Didi. And so, what do you think is the power of digital, especially in terms of equalizing from a gender perspective? And why do you think it is the best medium today?
Digital at least starts on the premise that we can create equal opportunities. It's not built that way, it's built with its own biases. But at least on the day one, when you have a tool, you can give it to both men and women and see if at least women can have an 80% go at it without the biases kicking in. That's one. Second is that my big passion for digital is partly because my second career as an entrepreneur is a completely digital career. I gave it a shot knowing nothing and created basic sensibilities of using it as a tool and reaching out to women and seeing how we can get together as a collective. It worked, and it worked like magic, right? It brought people together to share and impact each other and lift each other up, made a big difference. And now it brought me to the point of health. When I was struggling like anybody else was in the world of business, asking themselves, will this pandemic wipe us all off? Will our platform survive? I sat with my team and said, what should we do? We said, okay, we're not going to cut salaries. We're going to survive as much as we can on what we have. But what we will not take our heads off from is a serious level of experimentation. This is our chance. We sat down and created content around women's health and realized that in India, people don't know what their bodies are like. Women don't know at all. Men aren't any better either. Majority of the content that we create around women's health is even being consumed by men because they don't know anything about their partners and sisters and wives and whatever else. So we realized that the power of digital in being able to make people aware is established. So where is the gap? It's how can digital take access and opportunity and availability to a user. That's how women's health came about. And Dr. Didi by Gayatri, which is the name of the board, has come around as an experiment, as a stepping stone to a full fledged virtual care service for women, which is affordable and accessible. So, Dr. Didi on its chatbot has done close to 300,000 conversations. It is multilingual and it is in Tamil, Bangla, Hindi, English. As of today, you can even talk to a live agent and book a very affordable gynecologist at about 600 rupees, which is at least 45% cheaper than anything in the market otherwise. And our doctors speak close to 10 languages so that they can service their patient and consumer in the language of their choice so that they have no hesitation in asking questions about their own self. Which, by the way, to me is a fundamental right that we've forgotten to address. I mean, women don't know where where their bodies are, what that agency is, how their reproductive rights are protected by the constitution, what they can ask a doctor, how they can question a doctor, how they can protect themselves. And we've done nothing about it. I mean, I talk to a lot of organizations, um, probably not as big as Seva, but broadly doing work in that direction. And I go and talk to these women in Hindi or Punjabi, which I know a little bit. They speak a little broken Marathi. And I can talk to them and understand where they're coming from. And the number of women who are just constantly breaking down because nobody has told them that their gynac is linked to their emotions and their tears might be coming through their gut. Literally, we don't want to make the connection. So if you ask today anybody in the world, this person has a problem, they'll say, oh, woman, she needs to go to a ladies' doctor. Who's a ladies' doctor? It's a gynecologist. What does a gynecologist know about mental health or nutrition? Now we start pretending that that's one doctor for all solutions. It's not the doctor's fault sometimes, but many times it is also. So when we were thinking about this whole chatbot and the birth of Gayatri, We were reminding ourselves how, as people who finally cracked the code of understanding that women don't need one thing, they need connected care. That's really how we solve it for them.
Shaili, this is amazing because in a country like India, especially for women and women in the rural areas, to talk about women's health and their reproductive rights, it's a huge concern. So I'm sure these platforms are really helping them out. What is the basic difference between Dr. Didi and Gayatri, if you can tell us?
They are integrated. Like I explained, that Dr. Didi was born as a research effort to see how much of technology, from a chatbot point of view, could help women, because we wanted to create an environment that was safe and human proof. Women are very shy of asking questions, such as whether my left breast is smaller than the right one. Is there something wrong with me? Right? Or why do I have body odor? Right? Will I get pregnant or will I lose my child if I eat khatte khana? You know? So we got the doctors together and started creating that content. And Dr. Didi then came about as a chatbot, which we have very, with great intent, utilized as one that can be used in different cities, in different villages over a period of time. We recognize there is an urban rural divide in terms of access to tech. So we created Dr. Didi on a platform where people are spending majority of their time, which is WhatsApp. And it became logical for me because I am a great believer of not trying to take people away from what they already are doing or what they find convenient. So when Dr. Didi came about, um, essentially as a free chatbot, a lot of people started asking us, can we talk to a doctor on the other side? Right? So we started thinking about that. And the more we spoke to various doctors, we realized that this was a requirement even in the urban setting. So the pressure on women essentially is pretty much the same. Come to rural India. By the way, the idea of Dr. Didi emerged while I was living in a village, in an upper caste village, which I discovered that it was upper caste later. It's not like I chose to live in one. And I discovered that they still follow the practice of sending the girl out into the outhouse for the 3 days. And I'm thinking how embarrassing, the whole village knows that she's on her period. So that's how, when Dr. Didi was born, it was born to kind of solve a lot of these things that people don't have access to. At this moment, Dr. Didi is meant for people who can watch a video in different languages and also can read. But over the next few months, we'll come up with audio clips that will allow them to not have to read. Gayatri became, I would say, the larger ship that rested on the empirical evidence of Dr. Didi conversations, that not only did the people need information, they very soon wanted a solution. And the solution was therefore brought in by experts who were judgment free, discreet. So our hashtag at Gayatri is Khul ke Poocho, because that is the fundamental step that holds people back. And once they do that, then they enroll into programs that solve for very basic things. So there are ways by which people are now shifting to a lifestyle integrated solution like Gayatri offers, as opposed to a prescriptive solution to problems.
And in how many languages is Dr. Didi available in?
So Dr. Didi is available in 4 languages. You can access it in English, Hindi, Tamil, and Bangla. We're hoping to add another 4 languages by the end of this year. That will make it accessible to both the west, the west, and more languages in the south. That's one thing that we're doing, and the second thing that we're doing is coming up with audio, because I see it extremely popular in even amongst the people I know who work in homes in urban cities. They just find it very, very useful and fascinating.
And that brings me to my last question, Shaili. You often narrate the story of Rohini, a very intelligent woman from Satara, who went on to learn about making honey and has a business through social media. So, we at Seva Cooperative Federation work with a lot of women's collectives, and they face a lot of challenge as far as marketing their products on social media and other digital platforms are concerned. What do you think can we as organizations do to better support these businesses and help them on various social media platforms?
I think this is a very important question. And the reason I say that is because day in and day out, whether it's rural India or urban India, the one question I'm asked by women in some form of entrepreneurial venture: how do I make it sell? How do I scale? How do I make the digital piece work for me? you know and it's true that today there is a big opportunity at hand, but it's also true that organizations that are filling the gap between the people who have the talent and the production to those who can then market and voice it out there is a very very big gap. And it's just not, it's not a knowledge gap, thankfully. So I feel that there is a possibility of filling that gap faster if there were enough stakeholders in the world who are coming together and give them the support. Um, so part one of this is that, you know people who are looking at honey, pickles, papas, and perhaps a couple of layers above it as well, like woolens and handmade handicraft, etc. I think there's an opportunity for us all to get down to doing our bit in skilling. And the reason I say that is because actually, for many years, She the People has skilled urban women in understanding how to project and create a brand. Fundamental questions that we continue to run occasionally now, but very regularly in the past under the She Academy banner. The first question has always been, I have got it till here. Now I need to take the next level. And the next level actually is one fourth of that battle that they've come through. So I think for most women, the issue that continues to be one is that, are there enough people around to mentor them and show them the shortcuts to this journey? So that way, I feel that perhaps many of our organizations should come together and create a collaborative approach, perhaps even pro bono. So I think that's one. Dusra, I just want to say this. I think this is universally true. We're shy to market ourselves. We think our product is not good enough. No, we don't recognize that people will a product that's one third of good of what we have produced. They are making, sunshine based on just some marketing gimmick that they've sorted out. So that to me is another big challenge. And like every day I meet women who have started making something organic, which is delicious and amazing and beats many other things, you know. So I think what you guys have been doing, I mean, I don't even remember at what age I must have heard about Seva, and how there's such a great sense of pride when we talk about the work you all are doing, not just in our circles, but when we go overseas and talk about women in India and the kind of collective energy they need to have, right? It's very, very significant. And there is no power more inspirational than that of a determined woman who will sit next to you and nudge you with her elbow and saying, Chalo, let's do it. And I think that's where what you are doing with Seva, what we are doing with She the People, this is what keeps us all going on a daily basis.
And I think just to add to that, this is just representative of the sisterhood economy where women come together and support each other and work with each other, help each other grow. It's just fascinating to see that.
Back in 2015, when they told me I was starting a hobby with She the People, I kept saying, I'm going to show you how women led businesses about women will make money. We're a profitable venture today. And I'm very proud of that. Women don't necessarily need to have a situation where they're looked at as little departments contributing as an odd spoke. We are the wheel, and we're making the world go around.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing at She the People, Shaili, and for taking the time out to speak to me. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for finding time for me, and so proud to have joined this conversation. And thank you to all the women at Seva for everything they do every single day.
If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, do share it with your friends and family. If you would like to collaborate or partner with us, or get in touch with our women's cooperatives, write to us at communications@sevafederation.org. That is communications@SEWA FEDERATION.org. We'll be back with another guest and another episode. Until then, stay tuned to In Solidarity.